We will continue our work with parallel lines and transversals. This is going to be part 2 of our lesson. We've looked at special angle pairs. Some of them are shown here. When we have a pair of parallel lines and a transversal that passes through them, one angle pair is alternate interior angles. They are congruent. We also have same side interior angles, which will be supplementary. Their measures will add to 180 degrees. Alternate exterior angles will be congruent or equal in measure. We also considered the same side exterior angles. These are going to be supplementary. Their measures will add to equal 180 degrees. Corresponding angles will be congruent. And we'll look at question 5. This one says to determine the value of x and y in the diagram. So some of these diagrams can be more complicated than others. And this is one such example. First thing, we don't typically have the parallel lines going up and down like this, but in this case they are. We notice the parallel lines are denoted with the orange arrow. We see the transversal, one transversal that passes through, and then there's a second transversal passing through. And one thing you might observe is that right angle that's shown. And that's an interior angle. And then the same side interior angle is going to be right there in the red box. These angles equal 180 degrees. Therefore, I know that the two angles that are shown are complementary. Their measures will add to equal 90 degrees. So to solve for x, I can write a simple equation, x plus 48 equals 90, and then subtract 48 from both sides. So x is going to equal 42 degrees. So I know that x is 42. Now I'm going to look at angle y. And angle y, there's a couple of things you can do to solve for it. One that I'm going to notice is that it forms a linear pair with that 132 degree angle. So parallel lines aside, I'm just looking at this linear pair here. And I know that I can write an equation, y plus 132 equals 180, and then solve for y by subtracting 132 from both sides. Y is equal to 48. So I'm going to select option D, x equals 42 and y is equal to 48. Question number 6. We have a pair of parallel lines, a transversal and some angles labeled as 105 degrees, x and y degrees, which are shown in the diagram. And we are asked to determine the value of x minus y in degrees. So I'll let you put the video on pause and come up with, first of all, what would be the measure of angle x. Once you know that, what would be the measure of angle y, and then subtract those two and see if we can agree on the answer here. All right, so first of all, we're noticing that these two angles that are marked are called vertical angles because they're formed from a pair of intersecting lines. They are congruent. Therefore, x is equal to 105. So I know x is 105. Now, what about y? Let's look at x and y. They are on the same side and the interior. So these are same side interior angles. And we know that same side interior angles are supplementary. So we can write an equation, 105, which is the measure of angle x, plus y is equal to 180, and then subtract 105 from both sides, and we get that y is equal to 75. Now that we know what x is and what y is, we can subtract 105 minus 75, and therefore x minus y is equal to 30. Okay, the next question is a parallelogram, which is a quadrilateral with two pairs of parallel opposite sides. Parallelogram ABCD, and one of its angles is shown. What is the sum of the measures of the other three angles, angle A plus B plus C? Now, some of you might know something about the sum of the interior angles of a parallelogram, and you can apply your knowledge. But otherwise, why not start with looking at same side interior angles, noticing that angles C and D are on the same side of that transversal, so they are going to be supplementary. You can solve for angle C by doing 180 minus 118. The measure of angle C is 62 degrees. And then how about if you solve for angle A and then solve for angle B and then add the three together? Put the video on pause and come back when you're ready to check. Okay, so we know that the measure of angle C is 62 degrees. We know that A and D are also supplementary. Therefore, the measure of angle A is also 62 degrees. Now that makes sense because if you remember from earlier studies, opposite angles in a parallelogram are going to be congruent. So for that reason, angle B will also be 118 degrees. But if you did not know that, you could apply the fact that A and B are same side interior angles, therefore they are supplementary. So we can subtract 180 minus 62 to get 118 for the measure of angle B. Now we can add these three measures together to get 242 degrees for the sum of the measures of angles A, B, and C. Turns out, some of you may have remembered, the sum of the interior angles of a quadrilateral will be 360 degrees. All right, now we have a challenge problem for you. We're going to get you started on this one, and it'll be fun to solve it. As you solve it, just write down what the measure of each angle is. It's kind of interesting here. Angles galore, it's called. A diagram is shown along with some information about lines and angles. Using the information given, determine the measure of each angle A through M. So we know, first of all, that there are some right angles in this diagram, and that's a really good place to start. You will notice that there's a right angle that forms a linear pair with angle A. Therefore, the measure of angle A is 90 degrees. I think there's two other right angles in this diagram. Can you find them? So angles E and J are both right angles. E forms a corresponding angle with one of the given angles, and J is a right angle because it forms an alternate exterior angle with the other marked right angle. Put the video on pause and then come on back and let's see how you did. Solve what you can. All right, so the measure of angle C is 44 degrees because it forms a vertical angle with that 44-degree angle. Now the measure of angle I, let's look at the triangle that's formed. And we know by the triangle sum theorem that the measure of the three angles of any triangle is 180 degrees. Therefore, C and I must be complementary. Let's subtract 90 minus 44 to get 46 degrees for the measure of angle I. Now, right next to angle I is angle D. They form a linear pair. So let's do a subtraction problem. 180 minus 46 to get me 134 degrees for the measure of angle D. Now the measure of angle F is also 134 degrees because they form a vertical, they are vertical angles. Next, let's move on to angle L. Angle L forms a linear pair with that 44-degree angle, so the measure of angle L is 136. This is just the order I worked in. You might have worked in a different order. Next, I went on to angle M. And the measure of angle M is 44 degrees. I next went on to find the measure of angle K, that was 46 degrees. The measure of angle H is 44 degrees.